Namaskar, Sasyakal, Adab, good evening, and a warm welcome to everyone at Motherhood Club. This is Ekta Sehgal, founder and chief strategy officer, Motherhood Club. We all know that Motherhood Club is known to bring out conversations around health, wealth, and happiness. And when we talk about these three aspects of our life, they are all entwined with each other, interlinked with each other. If you're healthy, you work well, you become wealthy. If you're wealthy, you are happy. If you're happy, you will work towards being healthy and you'll be able to create a lot of wealth, not just monetary, but a lot of other kind of wealth for yourself also. But today specifically, we are going to be talking about our health, not our physical health, because that is something that we all realize over a period of time. If we are gaining weight or if we have a medical problem, we do reach out to a doctor, sometimes proactively, sometimes in a reactive manner. But the question that we wish to address today is about the mental well being, our mental health, especially for our little ones, our children who we do so much for. We go out of our way to keep them happy, to get them resources and a lot of love and affection. But in that love and affection, in that process of bringing them up, we are also caught up in the rat race of life because we are parallelly juggling with our own goals and everything. Do we at times tend to ignore some of the symptoms that the children are showing? Well, yes and no also. Why do I say yes? Because what I read that world over, close to 14% children are a victim of mental health challenges. And if you actually calculate that number, it is a huge number. Also, I was reading that 1 in 7 children in India are also a victim of depression and stress, terms that we use so loosely, so callously. So, today with us, all the way from Australia, is Dr. Amritash Rai. Uh, he's a consultant, child and adolescent psychiatrist, and co founder of Children Plus, an organization which is based in Noida, which is working towards the well being of our children. What do I say about Dr. Rai? With over 25 years of experience, he has dealt with many children to heal and to recover. Not taking much of the time, I'm going to welcome Dr. Rai and thank him for being here and taking out time, even though that there is a time difference. So, a warm welcome, Dr. Rai, at Motherhood Club, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be here.
Thank you, Ekta, for having me. And hello, everybody. So thank you for inviting me. So as Ekta said, my name is Amritash. I'm a doctor who originally trained from UCMS in Delhi, and then did my post graduation from Maulana Azad Medical College, and then I left for England in 2002. Stayed there till 2012, did my membership, and was a consultant there. And now I'm a consultant in Australia for the past 8 years. So it's been 25 years in psychiatry and mental health. So it's a really an honor to be invited. So and I'm also the co-founder along with my my colleague Vishal. So if I can have the presentation,
Yes,
please.
and yeah, over to you. I will join you after you're done with your
Thank
presentation.
thank you. So we'll do just a brief presentation. So as I said, I'm the co-founder along with the CEO Vishal Sharma of Children Plus, which is a well-being child and adolescent well-being center in Noida. And so our goal is to really remove the stigma from mental health and well-being conditions and make it accessible to people. So I was hoping to talk a little bit around so how we can take care of our children and teenagers. So being a father of a teen and a nearly teen, it's a issue that's really important for me. So um, so I guess first of all, what is it that can affect our child's well-being? So there are lots of things that can affect affect them. So things that can happen at birth or even before birth sometimes, how the birth is, how the child is brought up early on in the first few years of life. Parents have absolutely a really key role throughout uh, the childhood, how parents engage with their child early on, what kind of experiences they have in school, in kindergarten, preschool, and then when they navigate into teenage years, there can be hormones can be a big thing. So because lots of physiological changes happen in their body, they enter secondary school, and it so happens that both those things come together, making it particularly hard for some teenagers. So grade 7 and 8, um, academically things are becoming harder, socially things are becoming harder, their bodies and their minds, which is really important to understand, are changing. um, Friends become more important, and sometimes more important than parents, which is very frustrating for us as parents. um, the influence of drugs and alcohol can start. They can get exposed to other online influences, and online is a really particular risk that we didn't face as when we were children, and when we were growing up. There were other risks and other influences, but over the past few years, the online world has absolutely exploded. So it's really important that we keep on top of it. And then when our teenagers become young adults, exam stress, grade 11, 12, 10, people start preparing for the right university 3 4 years in advance, get coaching classes, go through any number of things. So that's a really stressful time, going to university where you often, not always, but generally have to move away from parents. You might have to move countries, continents. You might have to leave friends that you've had through, from prep to grade 12, make new friends, and that's obviously really stressful. And then of course the influence of partying, alcohol, drugs. And I think across all ages, the influence of technology, social media, and screen time, it's absolutely um, key, because it's everywhere. So we really need to be aware as parents of that. And so I guess because they're everywhere now, so we'll spend a little bit more time talking about what possible negative impacts they can have. They can have lots of positive impacts. Technology has really brought information to our fingertips. We can access information as soon as we need it. So, gone are the days where if you had to do some research or do a thesis, you had to head off to the library and then look through journals, request your professors for journals. I still remember doing my postgraduate dissertation where I had to go to the National Library of Medicine in near Ames and then thumb through all journal articles to find cross references. Those days are gone. So information is now at our fingertips, which is good, uh, but also there is less filtering of the information. So which some people can say that's excellent. So you get unfiltered information, but how much unfiltered is good? So my first point is that it can reduce the capacity to concentrate. And I don't know if other people have noticed this, that over time, our capacity, not just our children's capacity to concentrate on things, may have reduced. Um, so how many of us will read the newspaper in as much detail? And also, certainly in Western countries, the broadsheet newspaper has almost completely disappeared. How many of us still read novels? How many of us find it harder to concentrate on the things that we really used to enjoy, specifically reading? Um, and then sometimes we find ourselves really focused on one thing only, and generally, but not always, that can be technology or our phone, and that can be by design. So those the apps and all the content on our phones is very carefully designed to engage us. So and that's also true for our children and young people because they have developing minds. So we might have all experienced defiance, saying no, I'm getting off, just a minute, just 2 minutes, and refusal to get off their device, spending huge amounts of time on the device, playing game after game after game, staying up late. Um, the other bit, so that's the gaming bit and the engagement bit. People will watch shorter and shorter, say YouTube Shorts or TikToks. So the media, the duration of the media, or the size of the information that's been given to us is getting shorter and shorter. So from the 3.5 hour the cinema Hindi film to a 15-second TikTok, we've really come a long way in only a few years. Then there's the emotional effects of social media. So the friendships and the lack of friendships, and some things that can cause quite a lot of distress to people, but also positive. So I think the great hope was that we can access, get back in touch with friends who we lost touch with, and that certainly happened. Without technology, I wouldn't be able to talk to you, and we couldn't listen into lots of other things that we do. So there, the benefits have been overwhelming, but equally there are some risks. So the emotional impact, the pressure that young people describe to me when I see them. So uh, vocabulary that we didn't know existed before. So they say, "Oh, look, they left me on scene." And the first time I heard that, and I thought, "Well, what does that mean?" So it apparently means that someone sent you a message, you saw it, but you didn't respond, and that's supposed to be a something that upsets people. So the same, then pressure to maintain snap streaks, and were you invited to this party online, and then um, some would say that that might have increased rather than reduced our isolation. So how much time we spend in our rooms, busy on our phone, as compared to engaging with the world outside, and whether that also influences what we do, and how those influences interact with us to cause mental health problems, or problems with our well-being. Then there's the lack of family time. So the time that we spend with each other has reduced, or may have reduced, or certainly would have reduced in some families. And then again, the more dangerous bit is the access to wildly inaccurate and sometimes extreme and um, dangerous information. And this can be extremely frustrating to us as parents, because we don't know. Often, our kids, young people, are very um, against us looking at any of their devices. So, what can we do as parents? So, I guess talking to our children as much as they would allow us, and often um, talking to them in general, keeping an open channel of communication, but also telling or informing them about what we see as the dangers, not specifically for them, but in general, and also letting them know that they can always talk to you, and that you are a safe place to come. So you might be angry, you might be upset if there is something that's happened, but you are always there to be able to talk to. Because what sometimes people can do online is to isolate a particular child or young person, to say, well, look, if you talk to someone else, everything will go wrong, or and then also we need to be aware of who the important people in our child's life. So in kindergarten, it might be the kindergarten teacher, um, friends, relatives, and in secondary school, it'll almost certainly be their friends group. Um, and a general advice that I give to everybody is to share some safe together screen-free time. So even if you're playing a little bit of a board game, if it's after dinner, if you're just hanging out together, and sometimes, rarely, it may involve screen, so you might watch something together. So children and young people tend to talk the most when they're not being questioned, and when they feel relaxed. So if you're spending some time together, and that time should be um, quarantined as much as possible, but also not dependent on how everyone is feeling. So children should always be welcome in that time. Then try not to get frustrated. too much is what I should add, because I often get frustrated with my children. But and so I think if you get frustrated, it's not a failure, because everyone does. But I think we we will all realize that when we get upset to our teenager who's always already upset, or yeah, a child who's already upset, that increases the upset, and it doesn't reduce it, and then it makes us feeling both guilty that we shouted at our child, and also that we couldn't resolve the situation. And then, of course, you must trust your intuition as a parent, because you know your child the best. So if something doesn't feel right, look into it further, and then absolutely um, seek help if you are concerned. And that might be from um, a friend or other parents, or seeking help from the school counselor, or seeing a psychologist, um, or going to your doctor. So all those are really important things. And I did want to say a little bit about the myths about counseling, or psychological help. So first of all, people think anyone can do it. Well, while as parents we will absolutely, we will counsel our children, and we give them wise counsel. But formal counseling or formal therapy needs a specifically trained psychologist, or a a psychologist, or a counselor. And then people otherwise also think that I must have a diagnosis to see a psychologist. So that's not true at all. So so we the earlier the evidence shows us, the earlier we catch something, there is evidence that we can actually prevent further deterioration. So early intervention is a really big buzzword. So so the earlier we catch things, the less damage they have the opportunity to cause later on. um, and then the other thing that people think, well, if I go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a doctor, they will have to diagnose my child to help them, and that's not true. There are the the majority of counseling sessions may be happening for stress or distress, and they don't often need a formal diagnosis um, to help anybody. Um, the other thing is, people say, if I see a counselor, including your school counselor, everyone will find out, and that's not true either. There is a confidentiality clause in most clinical settings. So whatever you say will generally be confidential, or your child says will generally be confidential, with some exceptions. And the exceptions are if the counselor or the psychologist thinks that someone else is at risk, or that your child is at risk. So then they have to break confidentiality. Then parents often feel that they will be excluded from counseling. So that's not true again. So at Children Plus and most other good psychology and counseling services, it's really about working with the parent. So as a parent, you are with your child 24/7, or the vast majority of the time, and you know them the best. So it is really important for us to be able to work with children. And then the final myth is, of course, that only medication can help my child. But that's not true. Again, medication, absolutely. I'm a psychiatrist, so it absolutely has a role to play. But equally, a team approach is best. So for certain disorders, medication has a role. But for justifiably, for children, we are very cautious about using any psychiatric or psychotropic medicine for children. So there is lots of really good evidence for mental health conditions, or even for distress, for a number of therapies. So CBT is one, so cognitive behavior therapy. The other one that I've said, DBT, is dialectical behavior therapy, and that's used for self-harm and distress tolerance. Can be very helpful in teenagers who are going through a really tough time. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a specific technique for processing trauma. The other one is trauma-focused CBT. And then there's family based therapy, and that's for eating disorders. There's other family interventions, some interventions. So the younger the child, the more intervention happens through the parent. Um, and the older the child, there's more individual. But in either case, parents are really, really important. And then finally, this is what the Children Plus does. And of course, Ekta has kindly shared information. If you need any further information, please do not hesitate to call us. And my colleague Vishal, he he's available to talk to you. Um, and then that's it. Thank you for listening, and any questions. Sorry, you're muted, Ekta.
Thank you so much, Doctor, and for giving us a basic understanding about how one needs to go about this. So, before I ask you some questions that are coming to my mind, I would like everyone who's watching here to first extend my gratitude that you've all joined us, spared your time to hear what Dr. Rai has to share. That is one. And second, a word of compliance. If you have any question, please feel free to ask your questions, but no specific questions if there is a challenge that your child or a child is facing, because there would be no solicitation of any kind of advice or medication that would be done in this conversation here. If you need that support, you can always reach out to Children Plus. Though Dr. Rai is based in Australia, but the Children Plus setup is based in Noida, and you can always reach out to them for a one-on-one telephonic conversation or a one-to-one meeting also. So that was the compliance from our side, and also from Dr. Rai's side. So Dr. Rai, you know, uh, you raised very important aspects in the presentation, and I was taking down notes, and you mentioned about concentration. And, concentration is not just lacking in children, but it is also lacking in us adults because of perhaps either we are multitasking or there is just overload of information. And there is one important thing that you mentioned about the fear of being missing out, as these days that the acronym FOMO. Now, is FOMO something which is actually causing that unwanted stress in the younger generation, in the kids today, because they want to be appreciated every now and then? They the ways the schools are these days, schools are not very, how do I put it, they're not very pressure oriented. They're not, there's no pressure cooker where the kids are being put. So the stress in that sense of it is less, but that competition with each other. Now, why is that happening? One, and two, is that a reason why we are seeing a sudden surge in the mental health challenges faced by so many children across the globe?
Yeah, so look, that's a really, really good question. I think the the information overload is really important because I think we have a finite capacity to concentrate on things, right? So we can concentrate on a couple of things together. So you can it's really hard to properly concentrate on more than one thing. So it's very hard to read a book and watch TV at the same time and take both of them in. So similarly for young people, it's very hard to do their homework and watch a YouTube video. Although most of them seem to think that that's fine. It's a little bit different if you are doing audio and visual. So if you're listening to music, then you can do a visual task. But it's very hard to do two tasks which require a lot of concentration. So that's right. And so when technology comes, we all try and multitask a lot. So we'll often say, oh, like this WhatsApp conversation is going on and email pings, and then we quickly pick up and look at our phone, and then we put it down, and then something else will ping. So there's two. So our minds aren't getting that much time to rest. Um, for young people, as you said, yes. So schools have become much more aware, but there is a sense of, well, how do I compare to everyone else? So the competitiveness has actually gone up. So imagine the number. So I look at the percentage marks that children now get, and what is required to get into certain universities, and that becomes harder and harder and harder. So so there's that. Plus now you're able to compare yourself against other children across the world. Well, before it was your own poor class in your section, and then you would go and compete in entrance exams or something else. But now everyone wants to get into the best, either best colleges or the best coaching institute, or even socially. There's a lot of social competition. So who wants to be in the best groups, gets invited to the best parties, or best social gatherings. So those can all um, lead to a little bit of a sense of either accomplishment, or if you feel you're not accomplishing, pushing yourself too much and burnout, or a sense of failure that you're not in the right group, as it were, and so all that pressure has really ramped up. And that's often magnified because previously when we used to get home, the only way people could contact us was to ring us. Now they can Snapchat people, and I don't have Snapchat, or they can Facebook people or Instagram. I don't have any of those either. But so that's really, it's always on. So there's no off from that, and you feel under pressure to respond when something comes through. Otherwise, it's almost considered rude. It's been 2 hours and no one has responded to my email. So I think that creates a lot of uh, stress and strain for our brain.
Absolutely. That also leads me to another thought in my mind that, you mentioned that, say, you sent a message to someone and then for 2 hours there is no, I mean, for all you know, the person is genuinely busy and hasn't had the time to revert. But, we see a lot of this happening that people start seeking more and more attention. And if you talk about children specifically, the attention seeking, what I see all around, that the attention seeking has increased multifold. Now, perhaps, in good old times, the mother who used to be at home and she being the primary caretaker was involved with the child, double kids or single kids also, with the parents' involvement is relatively lesser. And of course, with a lot of co-curricular activities mushrooming, children are wanting to do things so that they get attention. And sometimes those things are not good for them, which they don't realize. So, why is this happening? I mean, is there a change in the general environment? Is there a change in the composition of the kids that are getting born in today's time? Because, or is it that the diagnosis is happening more as compared to what it used to be maybe during our time?
Hmm. So that's a really good question. I think there's a couple of uh, parts to that. One is the environment is definitely different. So uh, back 10, 15, 20 years ago, if so all the um, all the homework was in the house and all the distractions were outside of the house. So you used to be able to go out and play. But now kids don't do that. So when they go out with their parents on a prearranged activity. So the going out and playing has reduced. So there's less unstructured time. Their kids, the kids are most of the time is structured into little blocks, um, and 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 most of it is around competition. So, or how good are you at your tennis, or how good at you are at chess, or how, because your parents are spending money to put you in those things. So while before you just play. Um, so that way the environment is definitely different, and there is also more concern from parents around, are my kids safe? Certainly our parents were concerned as well, but in a different way. So I remember just coming home and throwing my bag, and out I was, and next time my mother would see me when I would come back in for dinner. But it's not that like that nowadays. So people go and step online and have their socializing online. So now the distractions and all the work is online because most of the homework is on the computer. So that doesn't change. And what was your other part of the
So that
last bit of it?
the attention
Yeah.
seeking part, the
Yeah.
negative behavior is on the high to grab attention from the parents. Is it because parents are working? So, or how does one strike a balance in that?
Yeah. So look, parents have to work. So there's no two ways around that. But um, I guess making use of whatever little time that you have, and also making a bit more if you can. At times, so when you come in, I know everyone's really tired and exhausted, but just spending a little bit of time together. So if that's possible, and it doesn't have to be everyone has to sit around a table and start talking, but it's usually best around an activity that everyone enjoys. So Sometimes me and the kids will play table tennis, or we'll play a little bit of a board game. It doesn't happen every night. So just making sure that you have that little bit of time, then maybe trying to spend some time with them at night before they're going off to sleep. That's often a really good time to speak to them, because in the morning all the speaking is shouting. So saying, well, let's get ready, let's go, let's get out of the house, it's late. So you're time pressured. So it's important to try and do it in a non-rushed way if possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there are two more questions that have come from the audience, and then I will put mine. So the first one is that teenagers are very easily influenced by their peers. So how can we keep a tab on our kids from negative influence? What are the pointers that indicates that our kid is being influenced by his peers or social media?
Yeah, so that's really good question. I think teenagers are easily influenced by the peers. So even if we look back to when we were teenagers, the friends were really, really important to us. And sometimes we thought more important than our parents, although that's not true. But that's so keeping a tab is harder, especially in today's world, because they're so if you are one of the lucky parents who still has access to their child's Instagram account, or has the password to their phone, um, it's still accessing it is still fraught with danger, because you lose trust. Um, but in general, people don't, and young people don't allow it. So the older they become, the harder it becomes. um, I think what are the pointers? So like I said, trusting your instincts, a change in behavior, or not even a sudden but a gradual change in behavior, more isolating yourself, a change in emotions, so being more irritable and more angry. And the other signs can be just being more secretive, doing things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And obviously alarm bells are, things like things appearing that you have no idea about, unknown expenditures coming up. They, for instance, the behavior changing from uh, night to the morning. So sometimes they might come back and they are really erratic. So those are the times when you think about substances or influences. Um, and of course, the social media um, influences not just by peers. They could even be by actors who are out to do harm to the children. So there's, grooming is very well described now, and it's a very serious issue. So yes, so change in behavior, being more secretive, um, when your instinct is telling you something's wrong, those kind of things will indicate that. So this is apart from, as children become teenagers, their behavior does change. They do become a little bit more closed up and secretive. But this is, you will get a sense that this is different. This my child wasn't like this 3 months ago. So that could indicate a peer influence. It could also indicate more, some kind of psychological distress or stress, because this is also a time when depression and anxiety are quite high, and they don't always have to have a cause. So it doesn't have to be exam stress, it doesn't have to be peer influences. They can contribute to it, but sometimes um, children just have to have face those challenges. So if you feel that that's what's happening, talk to your child, uh, get some information from school if you can. Not directly saying, "Oh, I'm concerned." You can, of course, but you can also say, "Well, how do you think she or he's been going in school? Have you noticed any changes?" And if they start to notice changes too at school, academic performance declining. That's another sign that they've been a good or average student, and their performance is going down. They're spending lots and lots of time just by themselves, and they get really upset if you try and talk to them. So those kind of things.
Right,
So even though
absolutely.
children are a bit more closed up, we shouldn't accept that that's normal all the time. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. So the next question is that it's a very specific question that how can we reduce the sound making habit in a autistic child?
Yeah, look, that's a very specific question, and I don't quite. I'm not sure what the context is, but yes, so some children with autism do make so the repetitive behaviors and sounds, and those can be really hard to extinguish. Um, and they can be so like screaming or screeching. So I think the one thing would be to see whether there is any other cause to the sound other than autism, because sometimes children can have tics. So tics are just abnormal movements, like they could be either movements or sounds. So an abnormal movement would be a shoulder shrug or an eye blink. So those kind of they're involuntary tics. And noises could be like throat clearing, or making repetitive noise like and again and again. But those will feel very so they're made worse by being tired, being excited, um, um, being stressed, and they're better when they're relaxed or concentrating on something. So with autism, if the sound making or screeching or sounds are linked directly to autism, because one bit of autism is one part of autism is repetitive or stereotype behavior. So that can be, and that will usually, then the sound making will be part of other repetitive behaviors. There might be hand flapping, or head rolling, or turning the wheels of a car around. So there'll be lots of other. So for that, you need much more longer term psychological intervention, and there are interventions that can help. Sometimes a psychologist can help to get some alternatives, and it will also depend on the intellectual capacity of the child, on what kind of behavior therapy we use. If the child is quite intellectually disabled, or has an intellectual disability, then there may be more behavioral techniques. While if it's more tics, I think the important thing about tics is that the child can't help it. So telling them to stop it only makes it worse. So it's like a saying, "Don't blink your eyes," and I cannot blink my eyes for 10 seconds or 15 seconds, but then I'll have to, and it'll become more and
Right.
more uncomfortable. So it really depends on the specific situation. I
Right.
hope that
So,
helps.
yeah. So, Dr. Ryle, just getting to a little more basics, is the chemical composition of the human body changing over years, which is leading to early onset of depression, stress, anxiety? Because one also gets to hear that kids as young as 5, 6 years old saying, while they may not literally mean it, but when you start observing them and you do see these behavioral changes, one does realize that there is something definitely not absolutely okay with the child. So, is that the because of the adulteration and the evolution of the human being? Can that be a reason why we are seeing such a surge in the mental health issues?
Mm. So that's a good question. So I guess we we don't really know, or we're not sure that the composition of the human body or the human brain is changing in any significant or meaningful way um, yet, because those kind of changes tend to happen over hundreds or thousands of years, um, like humans evolved. Um, but what is changing is the influences on our body and how our body is coping with it. So whether the body changes because of the external influences, or it makes the internal influences um, change the body. So we don't know, but it is a really important issue nowadays that children are being faced with much more now, in general. Of course, there was always trauma. There has always been trauma, like psychological trauma, for decades, centuries. But the in general, the demands on our children are greater. So not necessarily we make the demands on our children, but also society makes demands on our children. So we often see, oh, this 10-year-old kid did this, and oh, this is a world champion at 14 or 12. So all those kind of influences are changing, and so along with the adulation and the positivity comes a lot of pressure. So so it's really important that we recognize that we can't protect our children completely from them, but being with them, making sure that we get a sense of how much is too much, for the children. So, if you find your child being in school and extracurricular activities for longer than you are working, then it's probably we need to be doing something different, because they're only little, and what we want them to be able to do is to flourish and peak at the right time rather than burn out, and get depressed or highly anxious. Because kids, they will look to us, and some children, it also depends on temperament. So some children are more relaxed and go, yeah, this is fine. I'm okay with being last in my class in tennis. That doesn't matter. But other children are, oh no, no, I have to be right up top. And as parents, it's really important that we uh, help children with that. We praise effort. We don't just praise the accomplishment. So we just don't say, "Ki, "Arey, first I bahut acha." Um, um, but also well tried, because some children really don't like hearing that, and for some children even first is not good enough. So they'll say, "Oh, मैं तो अपनी क्लास में फर्स्ट आया, you know, पूरे सिटी में नहीं, पूरे स्कूल में फर्स्ट आना चाहिए." So there's no end to those kind of things, and as parents we can play a really important role in just tempering, modulating. And we often feel that if we say no, no, it's okay, that the child will somehow fail. And as parents, we have become really scared that our children will fail at something. And I think it's important for the child to experience failure, because it teaches you a lot. And it is better that they fail in school or when they are young, while we are, when I say fail, I mean fail at something, not fail in school, but fail when they are in school, when they're living with us, when we can guide them and protect them, rather than they experience it first in the university or when they first go to the job market, because that's much harder to learn from if you have no previous experience.
Absolutely. So there is a question which has come from Ela, who's our co-founder, and that was my also a question. So I'm going to blend both the questions. So she's saying that many a times teenagers get into a habit of consuming alcohol. Parents being busy with their own schedules, are often caught unaware, and the child turns into alcoholic, or let's say even drugs for that matter. So what's your advice for parents and how they can keep a check on the kids? So, kind of a extension to this is what I want to ask is that the the mental health challenges that children are facing, is it because somewhere we as adults have not have not been actually trained properly for parenting, or and we are more individualistic? One, two, lack of things that we couldn't experience, that is getting passed on to the children. The pressure that you spoke about, that, or and are we as parents not wanting our kids to fail?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So look, I think the drug and alcohol question, it I think it in general, of course, anything to excess is bad, and certain drugs are bad, uh, full stop. So they have massive influences on our brain chemistry and our brain, as such. So of course, if the child is younger, or if the teen is younger, so they're in grade 10, 11, 12, it's always important um, to, I guess, have a handle on what they're doing, obviously. And then there are certain things that are unacceptable. So you do not come home drunk from a party when you're in grade 10 or grade 9 or grade 11, and that's not acceptable. So in those cases, having whatever rules you think are important, like grounding or taking stuff away, because they live with you, and you are responsible for them. And sometimes responsibility means letting them know that this is not okay. um, and if you think that there are, if you find some drug stuff, then you trust your instincts, whether you should be confronting or talking to the young person then. So not confronting, but talking to the young person then. And I think the main thing is as Ila asks, is that whether it is a problem. And I think it's very hard to gauge unless you know what the extent of the use is. And sometimes we think it's a massive problem and it's experimentation. And at other times we think, oh no, it's just experimentation. And we only see the tip of the iceberg. So talking to kids, not ignoring signs that are really out there for you to see, and being frank with them and saying that it's not okay to do that. But um, if you're going to, then can we seek help? So seeking some counseling if the child will agree. And if there are particular peers that you are clearly seeing that there is a negative influence, then thinking about whether they have access to them. Of course, it's different if you have an adult child. So if you have a young person, 18, 19, 20-year old, then the amount of control, or no, not control, influence you have over their situation is different. So if they're living out of home, but it does not mean that, as soon as they move out of home, that you stop being a parent, right? So we were always concerned, and we will still be concerned about our children when they're 40. So it's important um, that you keep an open dialogue. You let them know if you're concerned, and you let them know that they can come and talk to you if they're concerned. So sometimes they might not immediately say, yes, I'm ready for help, but at some point in future, if you keep the door open. So it's important to not be judgmental, and saying, oh, things like, we really want to say it, and, oh, you've ruined my life and you're ruining yours and this is not going to get you anywhere. I think everyone knows that. And sometimes they don't like hearing it. But saying things like more concern statements that, I am really concerned about you. Um, is there anything we can do? So why questions are really hard. So if you ask me, well, why are you doing drugs? Well, I don't know, because I like them. Uh, but how can we change things? What can we do? Is there something we can do to that is different? And showing your concern. And as a parent, I'm really concerned about you. And then you can say, well, why are you concerned?
Absolutely. I think it's it's not just about what you say, it's also about how you communicate it and how you say it. So Dr. Rai, a lot of information from you, and a lot of insight. One last question before we can put a into our conversation for today. I'm sure you would also be aware that there are a lot of juvenile crime that is happening. Who is to be blamed for it? Are we as parents, in terms of the upbringing that we are giving to our children? Or is it because there is some kind of a, like a, there is a problem? I mean, the child needs medical attention because there is a pre-existing issue which has been unnoticed. What is the reason for this sudden surge in crime where 7 8 years old kids are being I mean, I cannot even express my concern on this aspect, being a mother of a 6.5-year-old child, and especially a girl. The kind of information that you are exposed to, like a 12-year-old, misusing a 7-year-old girl and stuff like that, it disturbs you to the core. Where does the problem lie, and what's the solution for it?
So that's a very hard question to answer. I think the problem is multifactorial. So there's lots of causes. That's it's very hard to pinpoint just one thing and say, oh, it's the parents, or it's society, or it's technology, or access to information. There are lots of these factors. I think the our changing lives. We are busier. There is sometimes less supervision around because from parents, because they're all working. Children are spending a lot of um, time on their own. Plus, when they're spending the time, they have access to unrestricted information almost. So I think it's really important to be able to filter what your child is being exposed to, especially when they are younger, because some of these kids, a 9, 10-year-old who is exposed to, more extreme content or pornography, they really can't process that kind of stuff. So their brains are not yet equipped to do that. So as parents, you're well within your rights to have content blockers on their phones, monitoring, and there are lots of apps around. that will alert you if there is there's suspicious activity on their device, and will block the activity. I think that's the really important thing. So it's this unrestricted access to unrestricted information. So it's not just a cause. It's not. I'm not saying that it's a cause of crime, but it allows people to access information. But it's also a risk for children because it allows other people access to your child virtually, to come into your home virtually in that way. So that is different from what it used to be like before. So it's really important that we are aware what kind of things our children are watching and what is it that they're doing online, especially when they are younger. um, you know Older teens may not allow us that luxury. But again, like Ela asked before, that you've got, if you or another person asked before, that if you've got changes in behavior, those are the kind of things that you're really getting onto very quickly. So I think the answer to that is it's no one's fault in particular. It is a change in the way society is functioning slowly, and the access to information and content that we were never used to before. So previously, if you had to spread a particular view, and I'm not saying right or wrong, you would have to talk to people about it. Now you don't have to talk to people about it. You can just write about it, and thousands of people will read it. And so sometimes these little groups can, and there was a very informative article in Scientific American a little while ago, and these groups, and they were looking at why extreme thought can be really difficult to uh, moderate or reduce, and that's because it almost forms an echo chamber in groups that all share the same uh, information and thought process, and then they egg each other on in that way. And so that has also been found in groups that encourage self-harming amongst teenagers, or encourage um, drug taking or challenges. We've all heard of these sort of dare challenges that children are asked to do, which are increasingly riskier. So those kind of things are so in that way, technology can have a positive impact because you can keep an eye on things, but equally it can present a challenge to us as well.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much, Dr. Rai, for sharing information with us, for making us understand that what are those cues that we need to look at in case we see any kind of change in behavior in our child. If our child is wanting to isolate himself or herself, the performance at school is dropping. And when we observe all these symptoms, I think it is important that we speak to our child, be more I would say consultative, have a consultative approach rather than kind of going head on with the child. And at the same time, if you feel that you are unable to deal with the situation, there is absolutely no harm in seeking help from your friends, family, eventually moving on to counselors. And just because you move to a counselor, that doesn't mean that your child has a problem. Maybe it is a passing phase where he or she is unable to process that information and doesn't really know what to do about it, and that is why that maybe the burst of emotions are there. And then, should there be a problem, I don't see that there is a harm to reach out to organizations who can help our children, be it a counselor, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. And as Dr. Rai said, that it is not that you straight away put the child on medication, or anyone for that matter. There is a step by step process, and there are multiple options that are considered before you actually put down the child to take medication. There is another thing that has come, that's a shared thought that somebody has shared. Just one moment. That I have done one activity in my child by asking to jot down or discuss some good things and bad things about me. So yes, of course, I'm sure. Generally,
Yeah.
I see that kids talk good things, but they very rarely give you a critical feedback. But if your child does tapasya, that's really great.
uh, Kids can be
Yeah.
very forthright in giving you feedback.
Yes, sometimes it can be very embarrassing also. But I quite liked what you also said. I think it was in one of our conversation that if you motivate a child, with either a point system or with something, some kind of a affirmative, that okay, don't really go after the actual accomplishment, but go after the little efforts that the child is putting in. Maybe that would also ease the pressure, the unwanted pressure, not just on the child, I think, but on us as parents also. Because Dr. Rai, being a parent, I also feel that perhaps a larger responsibility lies on us for the mental well-being of our children, because we are the ones who are actually pressured by these competitions, these comparisons, the fear of missing out, for
Hmm.
the whole fact of being accomplished, being right there at the top. Because maybe we also are a victim of our legacy and the baggage that we carry, which maybe we
Oh,
are passing on to our
absolutely,
kids.
and we're often giving feedback to our kids. So what the user says about our kids giving feedback to us in a more written down and not normally they'll give us feedback when they're angry at us, but that's really good.
Absolutely.
Those kind of ideas are really good. Yes.
Absolutely. So, as a first, I think, as a first conversation on mental well being for our children, we've got a lot of insights and a lot of things to think about. We will be speaking to Dr. Rai to understand more as to what are the solutions and get into a more detailed conversation with him over a period of time. We of course going to speak to him to figure out his time schedule and how we can do this. But for today, thank you so much, Dr. Rai, for sharing your insight. It was wonderful, and a lot of members have been saying that it is a very valuable information that you have shared over here. So I'm sure a lot of people have watched us today and will watch this. For all of you who have watched, please do share with other parents, because there is a child in everybody's house. You could be a teacher, you could be a facilitator, you could be a parent or a grandparent or a older sibling. Do look out for these signs and cues and see who needs that help, and let's try consciously to protect our children from all the unwanted hazards of social media technology, and let's use it for the actual reason that we should be raising. So thank you once again, Dr. Rai, and we will call it a day for today.
Thank
And
you for having me.
thank you so much. We'll meet again very soon with another interesting and knowledgeable conversation. Till then, stay safe and take care, everyone. Bye bye for
Thank you.
now.
Bye.
Thank you.